My name is Mia, and I'd like to thank the Betrayal Diaries channel for the opportunity to express myself. I'm 29 years old, and today I'm here to share with you a very intense story. It all started when I was going through a crazy phase in my life. I couldn't stop going to parties, clubs, and social events. Every night seemed like a new adventure, and I was living it all to the limit. The feeling of freedom, of not being tied down, was addictive, but at the same time, my personal life was in chaos. My marriage seemed more like a commitment I was fulfilling than something I really wanted. The routine with my husband was already stale and boring, and it was in this turmoil that I realized that, in order not to go crazy, I needed to return to my normal life as a married woman, so I went back to the routine. But of course, with one spicy detail, I had a lover to help me with that extra maintenance. Someone who took me out of the monotony and made me feel alive again, but I'm the type who tires easily. It wasn't long before the urge to do something forbidden began to grow inside me again. I felt that restlessness, a need to break the rules, to live dangerously. That's when he came into the story, the Angolan neighbor, a man with a strong presence, a piercing gaze, the kind you notice from miles away. Every time I saw him, I felt my body react in a way that was impossible to ignore. I knew it was wrong, but the temptation was there, calling me. And is there any better feeling than experiencing something new and different? The adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart beating faster, the heat rising. I was addicted to it. I couldn't hold back any longer, and so betrayal became a part of my life, a part I didn't want to give up. I knew I was playing with fire, but the thrill, the pleasure, and that feeling of always being on the edge made me want to keep going. After all, who can resist temptation when it's right in front of you, offering everything you want? To top it all off, Jack, my husband, traveled for a few weeks, and my appetite for new things increased. After all, the best thing about this married world is that you can have several different partners, with all the respect and pleasure in the world. The new experiences altered my senses, and now, on a daily basis, I was more attentive to the men around me. And there was this Angolan neighbor I told you about, a handsome guy who I watched discreetly even before he started getting up to mischief on the outside. He lived in the same building as me, but a couple of floors up. I always saw him in the condominium swimming pool with his wife and daughter. He was around 6 feet tall, relatively fit but not overly so, with a neatly trimmed beard. It's funny that, when I arrived at the condominium, he gave me a few stares and looks that put me off, but I, silly at the time, got out of the situation. Even my husband noticed, but he joked, "Leave him there wishing. I'm the one who enjoys it." Jesus, love, don't talk like that. Stay until the end, and don't miss a single detail of this wonderful tale. So, I thought that if I were braver, I might be able to have some fun in the neighborhood. I've always been terrible at looking for signs, but I had to try, because I might not find him on websites or apps, especially with both of us close to home. Strategically, I waited for him downstairs, as if he were on his cell phone or waiting for someone or a call, 3 times. He always left the house at 7:30 in the morning, so it was easy to predict and organize a move. The first time, I stared at him, and when he looked back with a "good morning," I managed to hold back my natural tendency to feel shy and look away, and as he replied, "Good morning, neighbor," I looked at him with more desire, and he noticed right away. I only saw the scratch he gave. The second time, our gazes met, and together we both smiled at each other in a mischievous way, and of course, we each said good morning out of politeness too. The third time, the same thing happened as the day before. I didn't know what else to do, because a direct approach was complicated, but the cards were laid down. That day, in the middle of the afternoon, I received a message from an unsaved number on my cell phone. "Good afternoon, neighbor. This is a Luke from apartment 7. At that moment, I smiled from side to side. I'll admit I got a kick out of his voice alone. "Good afternoon. How are you?" "Everything's fine. Just to let you know that I left a friend's motorcycle in your space. All mine are taken, but he'll take it before the end of the afternoon. I got your number from the block group." "No problem. I'll be there on time, Luke. Thanks. Helpful neighbor, and, with apologies to your husband, very pretty. Thank you. Feel the same compliments returned." I confess that my reply came out a bit mechanical. I'm terrible when it comes to flirting. I always have been, And even more so in that situation. I wasn't ready to be direct, even if I wanted to be. But that wasn't all. There was still a certain discomfort, a nervousness that I tried to hide. Something in his gaze, in the way he spoke to me, made me lose my way a little. So, I was indirectly called handsome. He wasted no time in noticing the exchange of pleasantries. "Yes, you are," I admitted before I could stop myself. "I find you quite attractive. With all due respect to your wife, of course." The words came out quickly, unfiltered, which left me with a slight warmth on my face. He gave a smile that made me wonder what was coming next. He struck up more conversation, as if nothing much had happened. I learned that he was a partner, along with his brother, in some technology stores in the region. A born administrator, always involved with numbers, targets, and growth. He started talking about the difficulties he faced in the business, complaining about absurd taxes, employees who sometimes didn't deliver what was expected. And I joined in. "I know what it's like," I said, trying to relax. "I've always wanted to be self-employed, to be my own boss, to be an entrepreneur, to have something of my own. That makes two of us," he replied, with a twinkle in his eye. "Working for yourself is ideal, difficult but worth it." From there, the conversation went on to talk about the condominium. He had strong opinions about the organization of the place, the improvements that could be made. Then we plunged into politics, in a quick debate about how the national scenario was making life even more difficult for entrepreneurs like him. We talked for hours. "How long have you been married, Mia?" he asked, as if he was about to enter dangerous, but at the same time irresistible terrain. 4 years now. I got married early, at 24, I replied, trying to keep my tone casual, but already feeling the temperature rising on the other end of the line. "Nice," he replied with a slight, almost malicious laugh. "I'm 38, and I got married when I was 28. Married life is good, but over time it gets tiring, you know. Lucky your marriage is still recent. Maybe you haven't reached that point yet." For a second, I was silent, reflecting on those words. Even without wanting to admit it, he had touched on something that I had been avoiding confronting for a long time. The routines that accumulate, the lack of novelty, that feeling that something was missing, but I didn't know exactly what. When I spoke again, I felt more at ease, as if I were releasing something I'd been holding in for too long. "I'm also dealing with routine and sameness. I think it's part of the choice we made, isn't it? Every relationship sooner or later falls into that." He let out a sigh, a low sound, and said, "Yes, but I'll be honest with you, neighbor. A woman like you, beautiful like that, deserves more, deserves to enjoy more. Without fear, you know? Without getting so hung up on it. I'm sorry if I'm being too direct, but if I were married to a woman like that, I wouldn't let you have a moment's peace, if you know what I mean." Those words hit me like a bomb. My heart started pounding harder, and I found myself breathless for a moment. He was bold, provocative, and his speech left no room for misunderstanding. I knew exactly what he meant, and the way he threw it into the air only made me even more tempted to continue the conversation. It wasn't just the compliment, it was the way he made me feel wanted, valued in a way I hadn't felt for a long time. I thanked him and giggled into the phone. "Thank you. But you know, routine gets to everyone, doesn't it? Anyone who gets married knows what it's like. I think the solution might be the one in the song that says that married people also date." I said it jokingly, but the truth was that I was testing the ground, probing to see how far he would go. On the other end of the line, he wasted no time. "I think so too. So let's date, huh? How's that?" His tone, a little provocative, made my heart beat a little harder, as if he were throwing a challenge into my hands. I tried to keep control and joke back. "Who knows one day? We can get to know each other better. One day alone, the two of us, calmly, right?" Those words came out of my mouth full of double meanings. The atmosphere was heating up too quickly, and I was in control of the situation, but at the same time, letting myself go. Then, out of the blue, he sent a photo. When I opened the image on my cell phone, my eyes went wide. It was a picture of his baseball bat, a huge one at that. It clearly lived up to its origin, and I didn't hesitate to note how blessed he was in that regard. My heart raced, and I felt my face flush. That man knew exactly how to mess with my head. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but it was no use. I decided to play along. Without thinking twice, I gave him a photo of myself. It was one I had taken for Jack, but now seemed like the perfect opportunity to use it again. I barely sent the photo, and his reaction was immediate. He went crazy. "Oh my God, I need to see you. We have to find a way to meet now." The urgency in his voice was evident, and just imagining that possibility made my whole body react. Comment: "If you like it and stay until the end, you can't miss what's about to happen. Look, tomorrow I'm working from home in the morning. My husband won't be back until the end of the day. How's it going for you?" I asked, my adrenaline already pumping before I even knew the answer. It was as if my every word carried a mixture of tension and expectation, feeling the weight of the situation and knowing what was to come. My heart was already racing, beating at the same frequency as the urgency I was trying to hide. "My wife always leaves at 8 in the morning and returns in the afternoon, rarely at noon. I can come home at 8:30 in the morning without arousing suspicion," he replied, and in that instant, everything seemed to fall into place. The game was about to begin. The tension between our conversations only increased, as if the possibilities suddenly became real. What had once seemed like a distant flirtation was now there, taking shape. Every detail he told us brought a sense of danger that only heightened the excitement, making every second an electrifying wait. "You come by the house, and we get to know each other. We'll see if the chemistry matches." My words carried that restrained desire, as if the time until the meeting was a barrier I could barely bear. The promise of touch, the idea of being alone, in the same space, in a setting that no one but the two of us would know about, made everything more intense. "It's impossible for the husband to arrive, but I'll check where he is before I call you," I added, trying to keep a cool head. But the truth was that my heart was already racing, my blood rushing through my veins, as I imagined the moment when everything would finally happen. "Perfect. Our bloco is always empty of people passing through, especially at this time of day," he said with that certainty that only increased the anticipation. The absence of people was almost a guarantee that, when I entered my apartment, we would have all the time we needed. "I'll come into your apartment for good and then everything will be ours." That "ours" sounded almost like a signature of what was about to happen, a declaration that, once inside, there would be no turning back. Every detail made me imagine what was to come, the tension growing with each sentence, as if the moment was already about to explode. "Anything. You hide me under the bed," he joked, and the shared laughter came as a momentary relief from the growing tension. But behind that joke, we both knew that the mood was different. The next day, with everything already arranged, I was waiting in the underwear I had only shown my husband once before. My heart was racing, and my hands were trembling with nervousness and anticipation. Before everything happened, I carefully checked where the cuckold was. He had left for work and, luckily, hadn't given any sign that he would be back anytime soon. That gave me a bit of reassurance. I gave the green light to my neighbor, who was already in his car parked in the garage. He knew the door would be unlocked to make everything easier. When he got out of the elevator, he wasted no time, moving quickly through the door, making sure that no one on the floor saw him. His heart raced even more at that moment. It was a risky moment, but the adrenaline of being caught at any moment made it even more intense. When he came in, the initial plan was to talk, to gauge the chemistry, to understand if the passion in the air was just something in my head or if there was something real between us. But to my surprise, he didn't hesitate for a second. As soon as he walked through the door, he came straight over and kissed me with an intensity that left me breathless. It was all so fast, I hardly had time to think. In the midst of all this kissing, I began to feel a bulge, and at that moment, a quick thought crossed my mind. It's not possible that this is for real. How big is this thing? It scared me. It's huge in person. My body reacted immediately to that touch, and the heat rose instantly. The whole situation seemed surreal, as if I were in a dream or a movie. Every second seemed eternal, but at the same time, everything was happening so fast that I could hardly keep up. In the midst of this confusion of feelings and sensations, I remembered that I needed to take precautions. I knew that my husband could return at any moment, and the last thing I wanted was to be caught in the act. With my nerves on edge, I quickly went to the door and put the bolt on. It was my guarantee, a barrier to prevent him from bursting in too quickly and catching us off guard. Meanwhile, my neighbor didn't stop. The kisses became more intense. I was completely surrendered. The heat of that moment took over me, and the adrenaline of experiencing something so risky, so out of the ordinary, made everything seem even better. I went back into his arms, feeling the warmth of his body envelop me completely. His kisses were intense, charged with an urgency that made my heart race. Our gazes met, and at that moment we knew what was coming next. He picked up his cane and began without stopping. Every movement was precise. Every thrust made everything tremble. Every second the tension increased. A game of control and surrender, a dance where the pace quickened until, after 10 long minutes of pure intensity, he finally let go, letting out a deep sigh of relief and satisfaction. Without saying a word, we looked at each other, complicit, and began to clean ourselves with the damp towels I had strategically left next to the sofa bed. I already knew that the evening was going to be intense, and I didn't want to miss a single detail. But we had barely finished cleaning ourselves, and we were already on fire again. Our lips met again, and the heat returned, even stronger. His touch was a mixture of delicacy and desire, and I felt every cell in my body responding to the contact. It wasn't long before he looked at me with a mischievous smile and said, "Luke, now I want it in the ring. Comment and leave a like if you like this infidelity story." Those words were like a shot of adrenaline. My whole body reacted immediately, the desire growing rapidly. "Really? That's wonderful," I replied, my voice filled with excitement. "I'll do it nicely, you see," I added, as I felt the heat rise to my face. The environment around us seemed to disappear. Everything was just that moment between the two of us. With care and precision, he began. I felt every second as if it were an eternity, but little by little the pace increased. He knew exactly what he was doing. His every move was precise, calculated, and my body responded. When we finally reached the end, we were both exhausted, sweaty, and satisfied. He lay still, panting, and I lay down next to him. At that moment, I knew that the story of that morning between us was far from over. After cleaning ourselves up, we kissed again, exchanging intense caresses. The connection between us was strong, and our bodies still pulsed with desire, but this time without the initial rush. The atmosphere was different, more intimate, as if we had created a bond that transcended the moment. Between kisses and gentle touches, we talked for a while, like two accomplices who, as well as being lovers, share secrets. He got dressed slowly, as if the act of covering himself was a sign that our encounter was coming to an end, but also a promise that there would be more. Before he left, I kept my eyes peeled. The corridor needed to be clear, without movement, and that brief moment of tension quickened my heart. My body already knew that the moment of separation was part of our risky routine. I checked that everything was quiet, and with a discreet nod, he left in the direction of his house. The sound of his footsteps disappearing down the corridor gave me a strange feeling, a mixture of relief and anticipatory longing. Now, what was supposed to be just another chance encounter had turned into something bigger. In addition to the steady lover I mentioned at the beginning of this story, Luke, my Angolan neighbor, had joined the list as well. Our connection was no longer something between neighbors. It was gaining the consistency of being each other's lovers. We started meeting almost weekly. When danger seemed far away, as a wave of adrenaline and desire overwhelmed us, it was impossible to resist. It was a fiery relationship, but controlled. The mere touch of him made our blood boil, and when conditions allowed, desire consumed us without a second thought. However, on days when things didn't seem safe, we weren't reckless. At such times, it was better to wait for the storm to pass. None of us were willing to take unnecessary risks, after all. As the saying goes, he who eats quietly always eats. And that's exactly what we did, in silence, with caution, in no hurry, but always with that burning desire waiting for the right moment to explode. When we met, it was as if time stood still, and only the intensity of our bodies spoke. Every touch, every sigh, was charged with emotion. I could feel the danger and excitement going hand in hand, but that only made everything seem more real, more urgent. We knew that our encounters couldn't be too frequent, so as not to arouse suspicion, but enough to keep the flame burning and make us look forward to the next meeting. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is where you'll find more and more stories like this, full of adrenaline and desire. Each new story is a unique experience, where emotions are always running high, and I don't want you to miss a thing.